Okay, everyone. So today I'm going to be talking about covering your apps while still using NPM. So a bit about who I am. I'm a developer advocate at NodeSource. My name's Tierney Cyren. I'm a member of the Node.js community committee. I'm a member of the Node.js moderation team. I contribute to various groups inside of Node.js, so this is initiatives, working groups. I've had a moderately long history with Node since the foundation was launched and since IOJS. And as my friend Dave here calls me, I'm an emotional support animal. So I love adding a different quote from him to every talk. Awesome. So NPM. I think just about everyone at this conference will know what NPM is. I'd be a little concerned if you didn't, and we should talk because I want to understand why you don't know what NPM is if you don't. But NPM is a registry, just surpassed 800,000 modules. This is about 4 times, actually at this point surpassed 4 times the size of the next largest registry of code on the internet, which is Maven Central, which is at about 250, or 200, 250, in that range. There was roughly 6.5 million downloads of modules in the last week. That's a really big number of modules. And in total, 25 million. Is that million? That's billion. I said that wrong. That's billions. Yeah, 25 billion downloads in the last 30 days. It's pretty big. It's kind of a big deal. Here's some numbers from Lori, kind of graphed very prettily. NPM is not stopping. It's continuously growing. If you actually look at this on a logarithmic scale, which Lori posted in a different tweet that was responding to this, it's consistently growing. There's no way that it's slowing down. It's up and up and up. For context, 7.5 billion is the same number of people that there are on the face of the earth. So you can effectively say in that week, there was 1 download for every human being that exists right now. That's a little scary. That's a lot. Awesome. We have a total wealth of modules. We have a lot are being downloaded, and a lot are being used. There's so much that we have. There's so many benefits that we as developers are deriving from our ecosystem of Node.js and of JavaScript that it's beginning to bleed into other systems, and it has been, or other kind of domains, and it has been for a while. These benefits are universal. They benefit every company, from a bootstrapped startup to a Fortune 500 company, to a Fortune 50 company. In a talk Lori gave yesterday, they said that every single Fortune 50 company is using NPM, which also means they're using Node. These benefits also apply to every single developer. We are all benefiting from the massive amount of code that is in NPM. We have an endless amount of choices of tools that we can start building things with. That's really powerful, and it's also a little bit scary. We have a lot of modules to choose from. That's a little bit worrisome. You can do anything with NPM module, or with modules that are on NPM, which means you can do bad things too. How do you choose which modules you're actually going to be using? Those benefits can also be seen as drawbacks, and that can lead to a lot of issues, right? There's so many different ways that we can be hurt by what can be put in the registry, or attacked by that. And that's kind of our fault for not protecting ourselves. We need to be taking care of ourselves and not expecting other people to do it. One of the things I consistently see when there is an NPM outage or a security vulnerability in a module coming from NPM is everyone jumping on a bandwagon of blaming NPM as a single point of failure for the modern technology scene or JavaScript itself, or kind of throw your own term in there. That's not necessarily right. Right now NPM is doing totally fine. This is really good. This was taken earlier today, so everything's operating great. What happens when there's an outage? Are you willing to bet your personal projects, your mission critical applications on an outage or on this service that is being provided effectively as an internet, a backbone of the internet at this point? No, you really shouldn't be doing that. NPM is a company that provides really, really critical infrastructure to everyone. Everyone in this room, everyone in this building, even people who don't know that they're using NPM or benefiting from it, those people all rely on NPM. It seems a bit assuming to feel that this company and this platform owes you this thing of always being up, always being perfect. That's not something you should really be expecting. Turns out NPM is really, really, really good at making software that you can extend, that you can build your own assurances to how to agree with what your corporate teams say, so what your C-suite wants from your teams. They're good at doing it for caching, so when, they're good at building out different pieces of infrastructure and abstracting their infrastructure away. So whether you're relying on the CLI to actually deliver you modules that you care about, whether you want to be caching them locally. They cache on your machine, they've built out that infrastructure for you. That doesn't mean that your entire org's dependencies are cached and highly available. You can even change out the registry. They don't care if you're using their registry. Everyone just defaults to it. That's a little concerning that we're all following the default. Maybe we should be kind of voicing some of our own opinions in how a registry should be alive and how it should be maintained. Even the payloads that you get with NPM audit, if you are actually maintaining a registry, if you're following the main registry, you can actually enhance the NPM audit payloads that are telling you what is vulnerable and what is not. And so if you wanted to provide additional data like, hey, this is running on AWS East 2 in 500 apps, we should probably go fix this, prioritize this specific vulnerability over other vulnerabilities. You can do that. Said, nobody does. So what can you do to actually cover your apps? NPM is super flexible, and there are people who have built out tooling and resources to actually go and make sure you have assurance that your apps are going to be up, that you're not going to have issues when NPM itself has issues. I can't stress enough that they're a startup. They are doing a really, really good job. And you can't not expect service outages or publish issues or something like that. That is going to happen. It's naive to think it's not, and it's naive to blame them when you're not also taking kind of precautionary steps to make sure you're also covered. So first one, set up a registry mirror as a fallback. This isn't necessarily an easily done thing in terms of tooling that NPM has provided. Yes, you can just swap over to one of these registries, but building out a plan internally at your company or with your team or even with your open source, groups, building out a plan of, okay, NPM is down. What can we do as a backup registry? What can we use? npm.js.cf is one maintained by, or is a mirror of the public registry maintained by an employee at Cloudflare. He's a good friend, Terrence Stock. Another one is cnpm.js. That is the npm mirror in China because of the Great Firewall. So I believe that's still actively maintained, although I did notice when looking at that screenshot earlier, or their status page, they actually have a server in China now. So you might be able to actually just use npm by default in China. So if you're in China or operating in China, that's probably a good fallback. Beyond that, you can actually roll your own. They've made it easy to go and kind of mirror the registry. It gets expensive. We have some experience with this at NodeSource. We ended up doing this. It's real expensive, but you can go do it if it's important enough to your company. And if you are working in a place where having that kind of open transparency and that resource is important toward your business goals, it might also be worth actually making it publicly available as another public mirror to help support the community, if it's worth also doing it internally. That said, npm has actually gotten a lot better historically over since 2014, 2012, that kind of, since they've become more of a corporation and focused on this, they've actually gotten really good at maintaining it. So there's a lot less of a need to actually go do this, but it's still good to have a kind of a plan in place. So the next thing you're going to want to do is be caching locally and publishing privately. So if there's code that your teams need, the dependencies of that code should be cached. You need to be caching this in a private registry. There's a few that kind of do this relatively easily by default. So npm-e is actually an example of this. They've been doing some interesting things with single tenant on GCP. So that's actually a really exciting addition to comparison to how they've been doing npm-e previously. And then JFrog Artifactory. I've heard kind of mixed reviews of that, but it's an option that they've kind of very intentionally built out kind of all the bells and whistles for. So if you have a large team, that's probably a good option, either of those. Beyond that, if you're a developer or you work in a small team, Verdaccio, I hope I'm saying that right, is actually a really good option. It's basically a private registry currently maintained by one person. I think I'm the only backer on their Open Collective, so if you feel like donating, you should, to help kind of support that. But yeah, Verdaccio is a really, really good private registry. It's totally open source. We actually use it at NodeSource because it's pretty easy to set up. You can also use Git. I wouldn't highly recommend Git because npm can sometimes get weird with Git dependencies, but it's an option if you really need it. And there's also local npm, which is a under-maintained module. I won't say it's unmaintained, but it's been less maintained as of late. That is just a pure cache. It actually has a very similar UI to the npm website, but it just caches everything you use locally. And you could scale that up to a team if needed. Security vulnerability sources. So you're going to need to monitor and kind of understand this stuff. There's a lot of security vulnerabilities. I think the largest, each of these providers, npm, Snyk, and Node Security Working Group, all have their own kind of databases. I believe the order of size, it goes Snyk, then the Node Security Working Group, then npm. But I think Snyk has over 1,000 vulnerabilities. The Node Security Working Group, I think, has 700 last I checked. And npm has, I think, 400. I could be off on that, though. So no matter which one of these you're using, you're actually going to want to try to use multiple to kind of understand the differences. CVEs are an interesting example in this because you have to roll your own. Like, there's not a service to automatically alert you of CVEs for node modules. Like, It's going to be a little bit dirty, but if you really want to have a full feed, like that's a good way to do it. But yeah, npm audit is built into the npm CLI, so it's pretty easy. It's a very good default. Testing between npm audit and Sneak, I've seen differences of 20 vulnerabilities in the direction of Sneak's database, and sometimes 5 or 10 in the direction of npm. So you actually do get tangibly different results depending on which vulnerability sources you're using. So kind of understanding that landscape and knowing when to use which or how you can use all of them is a really useful tool. And I know Vladimir is actually working, Vladimir from the security working group is actually working on an API to surface the Node security working group vulnerability data a bit better and more publicly. So it's actually a consumable API. Beyond that, there are some additional things I will say about the Node security working group. They actually have a HackerOne bug bounty program. So they're backed by HackerOne. Like HackerOne is very engaged with us. And the bug bounties are paid by IBB, which is like the Internet Bug Bounty System or something, something along those lines. But effectively, we are, as a foundation and as a project, aren't having to pay for this, but rather, a larger kind of conglomerate interested in internet security is helping pay ethical hackers to find vulnerabilities in Node modules and disclose those responsibly. So that is kind of a huge win in my book for the Node Security Working Group because it's very much kind of follows the standards and what we care about in Node as a project. So what other cool tooling exists? There's kind of a smattering of different things. And my team has been actually working on one of them, one really, really cool tool. So what if you could do a lot of what I've already talked about from a single place, from a single application? Well, I'm kind of happy to share that we've shipped a beta, the third beta of our NCM desktop application. So in this application, we kind of try to address a lot of these concerns over time and collectively. So we try to help bundle security concerns and issue triage into a single concise application that you can use to better understand your applications in development and as you're developing them, kind of the changes you're addressing and adding into the project, and understand how they're evolving over time. So we've introduced an updated list view with inline dependency chains, added removed indicators and new filters. The thing I'm incredibly passionate about in this is actually the dependency chains. It's really, really hard to know when there's a security vulnerability in your applications, how that's being introduced. Finding that is incredibly difficult, and this has actually helped me find issues in several open source projects that I'm responsibly disclosing to them before I actually share them. But yeah, so this is a really powerful thing, just being able to see where a vulnerability is being introduced. We've actually also surfaced these full dependency chains inside of the module view. So we can kind of, again, help you kind of triage as you want. Beyond that, we've introduced risk scores, kind of. So the kind of standard that NPM and Sneak use, we've also kind of adopted, which can help you better understand how impactful any given vulnerability is to your applications, and kind of help you assess what level of priority you need to give it. So I'm going to give a quick demo of that. So let's see here. Oh boy, it's my beautiful wife. Let's see here. Better? Okay, cool. So I have here, I have here the application. Goof is an application built by Sneak to actually show vulnerabilities, so it's a really good way to kind of introduce vulnerabilities without telling people open source projects that they have issues. So we can actually see here that we have 42 vulnerable modules. This is after the article I published earlier today, where I resolved about 9 of them. Excuse me. So yeah, this application actually has 42 vulnerable modules right now. So if we go in and actually try to understand, want to see specifically vulnerable modules, we can go and click the vulnerable modules, which will apply the vulnerable filter. And we can actually see here that a bunch of these are introduced by tap. So tap 5.8.0. So that's a pretty good sign that I need to go fix that. And this one is actually required by Mongoose and tap. So yeah, I'm going to try to fix that. From doing a little bit of investigating beforehand, okay font size? By doing a little bit of investigating beforehand, I've actually know that tap, the latest version is 12.0.1. It was published like about 4 months ago. So, you know, just changing a version, you're probably going to need to, especially if you're changing 7 semver majors, you're probably going to need to change your code a bit. But let's assume I've done that already. So, you know, updated the version. If I npm install, so if I npm install here, the Wi-Fi is working well. So if I npm install here, it'll actually use the updated package.json. And awesome, npm shows 13 vulnerabilities. But we've now introduced tap at 12.0.1. If we go back to NCM desktop here, I know that's a little bit small. We don't have zoom in on that. We can see we've actually gone down from 42 to 29. So by just updating that one module, the application refreshed automatically and is watching the actual node modules that you're introducing into your app, and will tell you in real time the different state of your application. We can actually see which modules were removed if we apply the vulnerable filter. We can see that this specific module was removed. All of these got removed. And so that's a really good thing, that we were able to remove that many vulnerabilities with a single change. And so that's kind of an example of one of the features that I'm most passionate about in NCM desktop, around triaging security vulnerabilities and even compliance issues with relatively simple changes, and being able to kind of figure that out within a minute or two. So with that, I believe we're at the end. Yes, we are. Awesome. Thanks everyone for coming. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Otherwise, thanks.